The Legion of Superheroes is back.
Some say that the book, the team, and its history are too complicated.
This Legion book is designed for new readers, but I guarantee that when the readers see this new Legion, they'll want to know more.
That's right. And if you want to know more about the Legion, its members, history, and stories, the Long Live the Legion podcast is for you.
We talk about the interesting Legion topics that matter, and even talk to some of the book's creators.
So get in on the fun now and listen to the Long Live the Legion podcast, wherever quality podcasts are served.
Planning to check out San Diego Comic-Con this summer? Come join Alex Marcus and Amanda Rivas of the Pop Break Podcasting Network for a family-friendly bracket-style debate panel on the best pop culture vacation destinations. Alex, Amanda, and their all-star panel of podcasters and cosplayers debate the amenities, tourist sites, and best street food from your favorite pop culture locales. Would you rather have a romantic weekend getaway on Paradise Island, a ski trip at the Fortress of Solitude, an architectural tour through downtown Wakanda? Come join in on the fun and find out what the panel has to say. The Pop Break presents the best pop culture vacation destinations will be held on Sunday, July 26th at 1 p.m. at the Neil Morgan Auditorium of the San Diego Central Library. Event is restricted to authorized San Diego Comic-Con badge holders. See you there. Welcome back to Digging for Kryptonite, a Superman fan journey. I'm your host, Anthony Desiato. This is part 2 of our Superman animated movie wish list discussion. We're going to dive right back in to my talk with Sean Eastridge as we continue counting down our most wanted Superman animated movies. So that was my number 6, your number 5.
All right. Well, let's just rip the Band-Aid off since I already hinted at it. But and I hate to devote some, but look, I love Donner Superman. Like, to me, that's the peak.
Sure.
I adore that. I am a huge Donner fanboy. And when Superman Returns came out 20 years ago, which is insane, I was just so happy to not only have a Superman movie that I could see in theaters, but that it was a semi-sequel, basically the Superman 3 to Donner's Superman 1 and 2. Superman Returns is not my favorite movie. I think in retrospect, my love for it has kind of become more muted, but I have such affection for Brandon Routh and his portrayal of the character that, for me, once again, this theme of emotional closure for these interpretations that did not get arguably he did with the CW, the Infinite Crisis, like that stuff. Yes, he did. But I would like to see a story solely focused on him, feature length, where we can kind of get that Superman Returns sequel we never got. And yes, I know Mr. Bryan Singer will likely not be involved, but I would like for the sequel to be the same vibe that X-Men 2 had to X-Men 1, where it feels like there was some promise of Superman Returns that really didn't get paid off. And I think some of the weaknesses of that film, if we'd gotten a sequel that was more like X-Men 2, more action heavy, action packed and exciting, may have allowed us to reflect more kindly on Superman Returns. So primarily story wise, I think let's focus less on Lex Luthor, because the land stuff, again, Superman Returns is basically just, it's a Donner clone. So I recognize that as a weakness. So I would like for this to have its own identity. I would really also, in addition to Brandon Routh, like to see James Marsden's Richard White come back. I love James Marsden. I loved him in this movie. I think maybe he might be my favorite part of Superman Returns. So some kind of conclusion, again, to that Lois Clark dynamic and this kid that exists, Jason. I don't know how you resolve that. I'm frankly almost more interested in like Richard finding out, like, wait a second, this is Superman's kid. How does that affect his marriage with Lois? How does that affect, Superman's her great love? So what does that mean? Marsden's portrayal of that character was so nuanced and so layered that I'm like, bring him back as the voice, bring Brandon Routh back as the voice, and let's do this. Let's just have this awkward, strange family dynamic. Bring in a larger than life sci-fi villain, whether it's Brainiac or Mongol or something else that is like, we can actually get Superman punching something in this movie. It's just the fondness I have for Brandon Routh and James Marsden, more so than the fondness I have for the film itself. I would say I'm an apologist for the film, but I also think the film is deeply flawed in many ways. But I just love Brandon Routh is so great, and I wish he'd gotten his due.
Yeah,
he got the raw end of the deal with that one.
I hear you. One question before I give my take. So if we're following Crisis on Infinite Earths, we know that the Brandon Routh Superman ultimately experiences a version of Kingdom Come and the events of that story. Would you go down that road or no? It sounds like you have a different direction in mind.
I think I would go directly from Superman Returns.
Yeah.
And I thought that was great. And especially because like, it just made sense. Like the time that it passed from Superman Returns, obviously you can't do a Superman Returns sequel. So it's like, yeah, give him the Kingdom Come suit. Let him be that version. Give it that contrast from the Superman we're seeing Tyler Hoechlin's version. Like I loved that. And just the fact that he'd been through hell and he'd lost Lois and was in that dark place. That's great for that version. But for this, I think I would want it to be more directly connected to Superman Returns. And again, I think the biggest example is X-Men 2 to X-Men 1. Like Superman Returns, the biggest problem with it is that it literally is Superman the movie in so many ways, and it doesn't really have a life of its own. And I just feel like you guys spent so much time honoring Donner's film that you didn't establish an identity of your own. And I know you're capable of that. It's like X-Men 2 is still one of my favorite movies. Days of Future Past is so good. So it's like, I want to see that more zany comic book sensibility with Brandon Routh in the role. And then like some of the, the Jason stuff, the kid stuff, the relationship between him and Lois, another weakness of Superman Returns. Can we turn that around a little bit and maybe redeem that love story? And I think maybe Richard is probably the way to do it. You kind of had a conclusion where Superman sort of is like, all right, like you're living your life and I'm going to fly off and be Superman. Cause again, they're going the Donner vibe of he can't be with them. He's a god among men. Maybe that's what it is. Like Superman sacrifices himself. He goes off and Richard and Lois can be together and she's okay with that. It's weird to me. It's just the dynamic of Lois having Superman's kid and Richard is not in the know about it is so weird and sketchy. I don't feel comfortable with a version of the sequel where it's like Superman's like, well, I might as well just come on in and Richard's going to sacrifice himself so that I can take it's like, that doesn't feel right to me. So I think it would have to be Superman at some point. Like you conclude the story, Superman goes off and conclusively Lois ends up with Richard. But then the problem with that is, again, like Lois needs to end up with like I'm even talking myself out of the sequel as I'm pitching it. Let's scrap all of that, all of my speculation and all of my digging myself a hole too deep to get out of. Brandon Routh, James Marsden. That's all I want. I want them back. That's it.
No, fair enough. Yeah. It's one of those things where, yeah, when we look at the Crisis crossover, if you're picking up years later and you only have Brandon Routh from that film, I think the track that they took makes sense, but we don't have to be beholden to that. And even if we are, I think there's definitely a piece in between that we've never seen that would be interesting to explore. Yeah, it's not on my list, but I get where you're coming from. And I would happily watch an animated Superman Returns sequel with that original cast minus who for a number of reasons, including the fact that, like you said, we've been down the Lex road enough. Like, let's mix it up a little bit. But yeah, it's one of those things. I've had my own journey with Superman Returns that the audience has heard. And certainly after becoming a father, it hit in a different way. And I don't have that negativity towards the film that I had at that first viewing. And looking at it now with as objective a perspective as possible, yeah, did it Did it totally work the way it needed to? No. Maybe there were some out there who would make the argument that it did. I expect most would kind of agree with what we're saying, but was it so off that it didn't warrant further development in a sequel? I don't think it was that off. And so the fact that, you never got to see the next step, the Superman Lois relationship, sure, but more than anything, the Clark and Jason dynamic.
Yes.
Like if nothing else, I would love to see that. So yeah, I mean, something like that. And you look at Brandon Routh and what he did in Crisis, it's like, I feel like this is something he'd probably be receptive to.
Yes, for sure. And he loves that character. And I'm so glad people have embraced him as the character, even if they might not have enjoyed that film, because he seems like a stand-up guy, and that film, it just bummed me out that it kind of just sort of sank and went away and nobody really talked about it. And now, like you said, in retrospect, so many people beat up on it and treat it as if it's like, it's almost like people treat it in the same breath as Superman 3 and 4. And I'm like, guys, come on. It's not that level of bad. Like,
right.
I understand its flaws. I struggle. Like I would argue now that I don't really enjoy the film, but I have a lot of fondness for what they were going for. And I saw that movie, I think 13, 14 times in theaters.
Oh, wow.
When it was out. Yeah. Like it was that level of obsession. So I would just like to see Brandon in particular get a little bit more time with that character. Felt like he kind of got robbed of it, reasons outside of his control, and would like to see him fulfill that.
Well said. All right, my number 5. So this is the one I was alluding to earlier when you were talking about the Warworld saga. I would love an adaptation of the 1989 proto-Triangle era storyline. We weren't yet in Triangle era territory, but we were building towards it, and the books were starting to function in that way. Exile in Space. After Superman has executed the Kryptonian criminals at the end of Byrne's run, and then he has this period where he's, unbeknownst to himself, running around as gangbuster in Metropolis. He's had this break, and then he realizes he still needs to come to terms with his guilt over what he's done, and he feels like he's a threat, and so he takes off for space with that breathing apparatus because we're in post-crisis territory, and he can't breathe in space or hold his breath forever. And he has this journey from world to world that, yes, will ultimately culminate on Warworld, where he'll be part of this gladiator situation and have to overthrow Mongol. So it's a really, really strong, visceral finish. I think it would be worth adapting for that personal journey of guilt, self-forgiveness, redemption that he goes on. And that's kind of the one thing that I would be a little nervous about. I feel like filmmakers, producers might be looking at this and it's like, oh yeah, Superman in a gladiator arena versus Mongol. It's like, sure, yes, we build to that. But there's a journey to get to that point. And I would want to make sure that's honored. And as long as it is, then I think it's worth telling. I don't know, would you necessarily get into the business with Cleric and the Eradicator? Maybe, maybe not. There may or may not be a place for that. But this journey world to world as he's trying to come to terms with what he's done is worth exploring to me. One question that I haven't fully answered for this adaptation is, how much do you lead with the fact that he's executed these Kryptonian criminals? Because part of me is like, that can be something you kind of seed in throughout, and maybe you don't give the audience the full picture until you get deeper into it. For people who know the story, they'll be ahead of the proceedings. Yeah. But for people who don't, there might be some value in that. Because it's like, you could open with a prologue where he's executing them and then we jump ahead to this. That would be fine. But there might be something to kind of creating an air of mystery about, like, why has he exiled himself from Earth? What is this about? But it's such a rich story from one of my favorite eras of the comics. And that Exile in Space storyline, Byrne had been on the books and he left so abruptly.
Yeah.
And we could have gone in any number of directions, but those creators, man, did they step up. And they crafted a story here that was really personal, humanized the character, and actually dealt with the ramifications of what Superman had done at the end of the Supergirl saga. I have no idea what Byrne had planned, to what extent he was going to mine Superman's emotional fallout from taking those lives. He
just threw a creative grenade and was like, have fun, guys.
But they picked up the ball and they ran with it. To their credit, they did so much. And so I really think this is a story worth exploring. But going back to what I was saying before, because I was kind of, I was considering for this entry marrying Exile in Space with the Warworld saga. And I won't go so far as officially saying that, but unofficially, I think there might be a way you tell this story and then you weave in elements of the Warworld saga once you get to the Warworld portion of the story. Like, I think there's a way you can kind of merge these two ideas.
There might be. And I think it's tough because, you actually, when you were talking about your idea of like, would it open with a prologue of him killing, like executing, and then maybe going the route of it's more mysterious and the audience finds out as the story goes along. But there's a part of me that's like, why not go for broke, go bold? When have we ever seen a story that opens with Superman killing? Like, it's like, there's a part of me that's like, maybe it is just like, yes, you open with like, it's literally like you jump right into this battle and Superman has to make this choice where it's like, I'm going to kill this guy, and he does. And then it's just like the ramifications of that, and he goes off. But I also like, I see the merits of yours as well. I think there is something cool to have it play out in like little snippets and flashbacks until we finally get the full story to the end. But I think the story itself, to your point, is so rich, and I love the way it addresses, because to me in my brain and to, everyone else thinking about Superman, it's like, well, Superman doesn't kill. He doesn't kill at all. He's not like, how dare he? So there is something hearing about the story arc, but then reading it and experiencing it. And to your point, the way that team, Mike Carlin and the rest of those guys picked up that story and we're like, no, we're going to sit with this and we're going to address it. And we're going to have Superman like really come to terms with it. I think that's a really cool idea, because there is always this question of, and I know James Gunn has flat out said like, oh no, my Superman would kill if pushed to the point. Like if it was something where Lois was in danger and he had to kill some, like he would do it. Not like he's like bloodthirsty, like, yeah, my Superman's going to kill somebody. You tune in for that and Man of Tomorrow. But like, I think there is a really interesting exploration there that Zack Snyder, I think he had the shock value of the neck break. And I think that's all it was really. Like thematically, it didn't mean anything. And it didn't really ever get addressed ever again as like, how does he cope with that? So to me, it's like, why not comment on that in a way? Like have it be the opening of the film. And then the rest of the film, it's like, here's why I'll never kill again. Here's how I put myself into a kind of purgatory and sort of learn to forgive myself and also come out stronger with a firmer resolve about it. I think if you're going to go with that bold idea, like let's go all the way, but really meditate on it.
I agree. As we're talking about it, I do think opening with the execution of the Kryptonian criminals is the way to do it, right? Not that this is a sequel to Man of Steel, but I do think kind of trading on the general audience's familiarity with that moment in Man of Steel, I think would be effective. And like I was saying earlier, making it a mystery, I think only gets you so far because so many people know this story. And yeah, right, not to go too far afield. We've talked about this so many times, but I'll continue to state my position with Man of Steel, where it's like, I do not begrudge Clark the choice he makes in that moment in that film. Now you can argue, should the movie have put him in that position, but that's a little different. I don't disagree with you. I think there's an element of setup and aftermath with respect to the killing that were simply not there. Right. I talked about this deleted scene from the script where Clark and Jonathan, there's this business about killing a wounded animal. That would have been really helpful to have in the film. Similarly, the aftermath. Yes, you get that scream. That's at least something, but then he's fine after that. So I think this story in a meta sense is a great way, to your point, of saying like, okay, hey, yeah, we know there's this larger question of should Superman kill and under what circumstances? And then what does that do to him? Yeah. And so I think starting with that moment, that'd be a very in-your-face opening, but I think that's the effective way to do it. And then you go on this journey that unfortunately the Snyder films weren't set up to deliver to us.
Right.
But now you can kind of tell it in this context here. The one piece that I feel like would kind of have to fall away is this whole psychotic break where he's running around as gangbuster.
I was going to say that would probably need to go. There's no way to do it.
I think, it's helpful in the comic book story in the sense that it's like, I can't trust myself. I have to remove myself. I get that. But I think the guilt over what he's done in executing these Kryptonians, I think that's enough in the animated film space for him to say, I need to leave.
You could even have imagine after that, Clark tries to go back to work at the Daily Planet and he's just like not remotely in it. he is out of like, he's just not thinking straight. He is, and maybe he like lashes out verbally at somebody, or like he realizes like, I'm going to put somebody in danger if I don't take care of this. And it's so extreme that he's like, I'm going to just remove myself from the planet entirely. You know, it's like you could easily accomplish the same thing without it. The gangbuster stuff is really fun to read in the comics, but it's very comic-y. Like this major twist, it's really Superman. And I was like, does that make that much sense? No, but I'm okay with it. It just doesn't work as well if you're trying to tell this like singular story. But I think you can get the point across doing something like that with a sort of psychotic break where he kind of has to like pull himself back, or has that moment of like clarity where he's like, what am I like? This is affecting me way more than is good or safe for the people around me, for the planet. I am not safe for the planet. And then like that journey of forgiveness and acceptance, like, and that's the thing. It's like connecting it to Philip Kennedy Johnson's Warworld saga. It's a very different Superman, you know, like that. And the journey Superman goes on, like of inspiring people, but there may be a marriage there.
Yeah, maybe, there might be a point of connection there.
Yeah, maybe like by being amongst the lowest of the low, it reminds him what he brings to the table, why people need a Superman. And like, I could see a scene where he talks to a prisoner, and maybe a murderer, like a prisoner, like who's like, I've murdered so many people. Like I've asked myself, can I be forgiven? And like him kind of, you know, like realizing, because you know, killing is such a like, you know, Superman doesn't do it, but like how many incredible real life stories have we heard of like murderers who have like found forgiveness and somehow come to redemption and found a way to take their pain and channel it into something positive. There's a story there, and it could be something interesting to examine with Superman. And I think the shock value of having this story like would pull in people who maybe wouldn't necessarily, again, like pulling in an audience who is like, wow, that's an interesting take. I didn't expect a Superman story to go in that direction. It could be really cool.
Yeah, it's like you open with him. And I mean, again, I'm assuming we would follow closely to the comics that preceded. They could spin it differently, but it's like you open with him with the gold and then green kryptonite used against the Kryptonian trio. And then like he wakes up in a cold sweat. You realize he's reliving this via a dream. And then to your point, it's like he goes to the office and he's just like, he can't focus. He can't connect. And this builds to him leaving and marrying it to the Warworld saga business from Philip Kennedy Johnson, right? In that storyline, it's like, yeah, he's going to Warworld to dethrone Mongol and free the people. But what if in this version of the story, he sunk so low, he just allows himself to be taken. He's prepared to just do his penance by fighting in this gladiator combat. Whatever happens to him, he doesn't care. But then he realizes, no, there are these people he needs to fight for. And so as he's inspiring them, they're inspiring him. And now we're back at it. I feel like
there we go.
This could be something.
I think that's it. I like that.
I think thematically that would be a way to go. But yeah, Exile in Space would really, really be happy to see that. So that was my number 5. Your number 4.
Let's go ahead and do, we're talking about Superman. All right, we'll allow him to kill for the sake of the Exile storyline. I'm going to go the other route, which is whatever happened to the Man of Tomorrow, Alan Moore and Kurt Swan doing that story.
Can I jump in here and say this is represented on my list a bit higher? Do you mind if we table this until we get to it?
We'll hold off on this. So let me skip and go to, let me do an original then. I'll do, this is really just a pitch to James. I actually want a live action version of this because he did it with Guardians of the Galaxy. It's in his wheelhouse. We need a Christmas at the Kents with the current Ma and Pa Kent, I think. And all right, we'll put it in animated form for the sake of this episode, Anthony, but this is really my pitch. I would love to see Neva Howell and Pruitt Taylor Vince. Literally, it's from their perspective. They're prepping the farm for the holidays. Clark's going to bring Lois home for the first time, and maybe this is the first time they get to meet Lois under circumstances that aren't our son is poisoned by kryptonite and might be dying, and it's bringing the potential wife home to the family for the first time. But then also, why not bring Mr. Terrific, Guy Gardner around? These people who wouldn't necessarily be into a holiday celebration with family. This is stupid and corny. But I think if you do it from Ma and Pa's perspective, have it be like start with them at home, making up the farm, and then bring everyone else into it. It could be very, very, very fun. But I feel like, again, low hanging fruit. I don't know why we haven't gotten some variation of this already. But yeah, I don't know. I would like that.
I would like that too. I mean, I think about the live action Guardians Christmas special. Like that was a ton of fun. So yeah, I think a live action version could definitely work. But yeah, in the animated space, I would love to see it. I mean, the Comfort and Joy episode from the Justice League animated series, that's such a standout, something in that vein. Yeah, I would. Yeah, I mean, to have, because I think about that episode, and then more so in the comic book realm, we've gotten various holiday centric stories. But yeah, to really kind of see that fleshed out a little bit, well, yeah, that would be fun to add to the media library here. Yeah, that would be cool.
Yes. And I would like to see, like, as far as Clark and Lois's journey, I would like to see Clark kind of like, I'm bringing you to meet my parents. And maybe Lois is like kind of freaking out about it a little bit. In some ways, maybe personally, because if we don't really know in this DCU version of the character, like, is her father like a general? Like,
right.
Like, what is the relationship with Lucy like? Like, are they estranged from their mother in the same way? You know, so maybe this is her first family get together, and Lois strikes me as like she's very headstrong, not as emotionally vulnerable and open as Clark is. Maybe it's like a little strange for her to be brought home to the family Christmas and like, are we ready for this part or this step in our relationship? Like, this is really my first Christmas ever. How do Ma and Pa play a role in that? Like, I'm seeing this very much as they are the central characters of the story, and Clark and Lois are kind of supporting characters. So maybe Clark is going to John and talking about like, yeah, I think, you know, I really am excited about this, but I don't know. And Ma is giving advice to Guy Gardner. And like, I just like the dynamic of that version of Ma and Pa with these like larger than life heroes. But then there's also a part of me that it's like, oh, I would really love for like Jimmy Olsen to be there and Perry White, but I don't know how you do that with the secret identities and stuff. Although there is kind of this funny hinting that they might know, like, how long have they been hooking up? Oh, a few months, like that kind of thing. So maybe they do know. And then like, even you could connect Smallville as well. They go to the town square. There's the Christmas lighting, all that stuff we were talking about that we love in For All Seasons, that small town vibe. Maybe we could put it in there as well. So again, I think of it as a Ma-Pa centric story with Superman, really not any heroics, just the humor and the humanity of seeing these heroes in this like small, like low key environment with Ma and Pa giving these superheroes very grounded, great earthly advice to help them along their way and their journeys.
I dig that, man. That would be cool. With the Daily Planet crew, they could be a subplot. We keep cutting back to them. They're stuck in the office trying to get out the last edition before the clock strikes 12.
Or maybe there's like an awful snowstorm or something. It's like, great, now we're stuck at the Daily Planet for the night because we couldn't get out. So yeah, we could do that.
I like that.
Maybe Superman ends up flying back to the Daily Planet to give them a hand.
Yeah. All right, so that was your number 4. Well, not originally your number 4, but I appreciate you saving whatever happened. My number 4, this should not shock the audience at all. Emperor Joker. Come on now.
Oh.
I
don't know this one either. Anthony, give me the pitch.
Also during the Loeb Kelly era, this was their summer 2000 event, 2 months, spanned the main 4 titles plus a special. Now, as we've talked about in the past, was interesting as this was originally coming out because the first month it was called Superman Arkham. And then there was this mysterious one-shot in between that had been solicited. It was called Superman Emperor ? So I don't know, a word might have leaked out on message boards or whatnot. But for me, I remember as a 13-year-old kid not knowing where this was going and then getting to the comic shop and seeing Emperor Joker. It's like, what? It was a ton of fun. Obviously, this would be called Emperor Joker. So you would know going in what it was going to be. But yeah, the essential idea is Superman wakes up in a world gone mad. He's in his black costume. He's locked up at Arkham. There's an Acme bomb in place of the Daily Planet Globe. Lois Lane hates him. Everything's messed up. And what you find out, as the title suggests, this is a world rewritten by the Joker who has usurped the powers of Mxyzptlk. And Batman...
Wow. I don't know, like, because I've seen Emperor Joker. I've seen the images, of course, and I've just always been like, I don't know what that is. But I love that.
It's a weird, wild, fun ride. And Batman really gets put through the ringer, as you would expect in a world where Joker has ultimate power. But what I
Right.
appreciated about this, and what would be key to this story, I cannot stress this enough, it's ultimately a Superman story. Batman plays a key role, and the idea, I won't spoil it for you, but the idea of Batman is critical to Superman's ultimate defeat of Emperor Joker. It plays out beautifully, but it's not a Batman story, and it's not even a Superman Batman storyline. Unfortunately, I feel like the instinct would be to make it that if this were to be adapted.
And frankly, as somebody who didn't know the story, I didn't even really know that Superman was so central to it.
Yeah, no, it was a full-on Superman story. I mean, that was one of the things that was interesting about it. This idea of the cross-pollination between the Superman books and the Batman books. It was like, yeah, you would have expected this to just be a Mixus-Pitalik story if you were going to do it. But no, it's like Joker is the one who's using Mixie's power to rewrite reality. And it's a highlight. I recently did an episode of Case Aiken's Trade School podcast series, and this was my selection, so it's top of mind. But I said this when we did our Emperor Joker episode. I'll say it again now. I think it's fun, like just to see Superman and our regular cast of characters in this twisted situation. This also introduced new villains like Scorch. She didn't have the biggest legacy in comic books, but she had a role to play. But this also gave us a new version of Bizarro #1. So you've got the Bizarro angle to play here. It's also one of those things where, yes, would I want it generally to follow the core beats of the story? Yes. But as far as the specific instances, scenes, moments, I think there's room to play here. It doesn't have to follow the comic book verbatim. So I think there's a lot of fun opportunity here to just kind of get weird with it. As long as I think we ultimately build to the same climax, which I think really is funny and fourth wall breaking and really interesting. And I will also say, while I continue to recommend the whole Loeb Kelly era of the Superman titles,
Sure.
This is like the one story you could just read this in a vacuum because it's this alternate reality sort of thing. It's like almost anything else, like President Luthor's great, but President Luthor's not a 6-part storyline. Like it's a subplot in all these books.
Right.
You kind of got to read everything to get the full effect. But this really stands on its own, just as it could stand as its own as an animated movie. Though I guess if I'm getting really specific here, well, I guess I have to walk this back a little bit, because what I was going to say is that I would love to see this done in the style of Superman, Batman, Public Enemies, where we were emulating the art of Ed McGuinness, who was one of the primary artists in Emperor Joker. The only reason why I say I walk it back is, in those movies, you had Tim Daly and Kevin Conroy, and obviously we don't have him anymore. So it's like, I don't know, maybe you just make it totally its own thing. I don't know. But if it were to emulate the art of Ed McGuinness, I would definitely be there for that. So Emperor Joker, I've been saying it for years. I feel like this is a missed opportunity because I feel like the title alone, would grab people.
Easy sell. People are like, Joker, I'm in. Like, everyone loves the Joker. And my interest is peaked. Like this is the first time hearing what the actual arc is about. And I'm like, I have to dig this up. Like, that sounds awesome.
It's fun. They're all on the DC app. There was recently a deluxe edition hardcover that they put out. They've collected it in softcover before, but yeah, it's just a fun, wild ride. And yeah, just to see the Joker in that capacity, a Joker Superman battle, like it's just different than what you would typically expect.
That's great. I love that.
All right, so that's my number 4. Your number 3. We're really winding down here.
Yeah, I'm gonna go off the beaten path and do an Elseworld story. I'm gonna go with Secret Identity by Kurt Busiek and Stuart. Is it Imminent?
Imminent, I believe, is the pronunciation.
Yeah.
Oh,
makes
yeah.
me think M&M, and it just makes me want to eat M&Ms. But Imminent. It's been a minute since I read this. I picked up before this episode we started recording. I picked up the first issue just to kind of look at it again and immerse myself in the art. And I was just like, man, this is so good. But the concept, I'm sure many people already know, but the concept is it's the real world. There is a character named Clark Kent who is mocked incessantly by friends and family for being named Clark Kent. Obviously his parents are the Kents. They named him Clark kind of as a joke. His birthday, everyone gets him Superman stuff. He hates it. He lives in Kansas, so that makes it worse. Everyone is always making fun of him. Like, oh, like, aren't you going to run to school? Like all of that stuff. He gets picked on all the time. And then he happens to develop Superman's powers. Like he actually gets that range of powers. And it's kind of like, what would you do? Like the irony of Clark Kent getting Superman powers, but like he kind of takes on the response. All right, well, I guess I have to play out that role. But because it's done in the real world, because it is, or the quote unquote, the real world, because it is an Elseworlds tale, completely unconnected to any kind of long running series or any arc or anything like that, it feels that much more unique. It feels that much more special. And it's incredibly moving because it just follows him over the course of like almost his whole life. And like, what is his life? Like what happens if you have these powers in a real world? Would it play out the way you expect? Like, would you be a hero? How would people respond to you? Would you take on the cape and the, S shield, not to spoil it, but obviously since it's a Superman story, like there is an element of those symbols being present. But it's such a human story. It's from that human perspective. And I love it so much. It also, again, these stories that kind of are commenting on Superman and what makes him special, it really, really does that. And it really is kind of a fun way to address just the general, like how we as the public view this character too. Like, this character lives in our world, quote unquote. So we know that Superman doesn't exist, but it kind of touches on like what makes that character special and so important. And I think it would work really well, especially with that art style, like definitely adapt that to the screen. And good standalone story, easy to tell in like a 90, 120 minute movie.
Yeah, I think that would work really nicely. And, you can imagine the trailer or the poster. It's like, what would you do?
Yes.
if you had the powers of Superman? Like, I feel like that's a cool hook for it. That's been a favorite. I feel like when I revisited it, we did an episode a few years ago, and I don't feel like I got as much out of it as I had in the past, but it's still one that I do hold up. And I do remember reading it that first time and really being struck by like what a different kind of Superman story it was, and how emotional and heartfelt and personal it was. And yeah, it was really affecting to really follow that character across the journey, the years of his life. So yeah, I think this is, not unlike For All Seasons where you started. It's like, yeah, I feel like this is another one where you take people by surprise a little bit. You give them a different kind of animated movie.
Yes. Yeah. And I think, to your point, I think it is kind of like, I don't know, it feels a little outside the grain. So people might be pleasantly surprised. I think people might be shocked by how moving they find it.
Yeah.
But also to your point, I think I don't remember when exactly it came out. It was early 2000s.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I want to say, I feel like maybe we've seen this story a lot more. Like we've seen a version of the story of like, what if the superhero existed in the real world? So in some ways, I think maybe that robs it of the emotional impact. But I remember picking it up in the bookstore when it had first come out and just like being so like moved by it as a teenager. And I'm curious now, literally, I don't think I've read it for about 20 years or so. So having just picked it back up again, started it, I remember feeling, not to spoil, but like, I remember as a kid, not kind of turning off when it's like, oh, he gets married. And like as a teenager, I'm like, I don't ever want to get married. But now as someone married with a family, like going back and rereading those sections and seeing how they might impact me now, I don't know. I'm very, very curious, but I remember it feeling like very lovely and a really beautiful meditation on life and the character of Superman as well.
Nice. No, that's a great pick. I talk about Smallville a lot, but when it comes to listening, one podcast is at the top of my queue. Always Hold On to Smallville, hosted by our pal, Zach Moore. Zach and his guests bring tremendous insight, passion, and humor to each and every episode. And while their series rewatch has concluded, the podcast continues with more great Smallville and Superman talk. Listen wherever you get podcasts and keep an eye out for the other shows on the Always Hold On to network. I'm a parent, which means that a family-friendly comic shop is a must, and there's none better than Aw Yeah Comics. Visit one of their 3 locations, Harrison, New York, Muncie, Indiana, or Skokie, Illinois, home to our pal, Sweet Sweet Bernie. Follow them on social media and at awyeahcomics.com for news about signings, live sales, and much more. Their name says exactly how they feel about it. Say it with me now. Aw yeah. It's been over a decade since my comic shop closed, But if there's one place where I feel the same sense of camaraderie, it's Fat Moose Comics, the Garden State's best and oldest comic book store, led by current owner Sean Hendricks. Visit Fat Moose in Whippany, New Jersey, and be sure to reach out via the Fat Moose Comics Facebook page. Moose is also home to our main man, Justin DeVoe, who is taking you inside his world of collecting and cosplay on his YouTube channel, Tannelier's Basement. Subscribe today. This podcast is sponsored in part by Rick Reason. No product pitch this time, no big sales campaign. Just a comic fan helping support a show he genuinely enjoys. Rick believes comics matter because stories matter, especially ones about hope, grief, second chances, and trying to be better than you were yesterday. Follow Rick Reason on Facebook for comics, humor, life reflections, and the occasional third shift existential crisis. All right, my number 3, this too should not come as a surprise. I've been saying this for years. The New Krypton Saga. Now, virtually everything I've cited before, I think could be done, could easily be done in one movie. This is the one I guess I'm going to cheat a little bit and say the New Krypton Saga would need to at least be a duology. We need a 2-part movie, ideally a trilogy. I think a trilogy would probably be the best. But this, of course, was the 2008 to 2010 comic book storyline where Kandor is restored. So you've got 100,000 Kandorians with the powers of Superman initially on Earth. Then they go form their own planet in orbit next to Earth, essentially. And there's conflict and tension with humanity. And Superman goes to live on New Krypton to keep apprised of what's going on. He becomes a member of the military guild. We see the Kandorians free Zod to be their military leader. And you see a shocking dynamic, I think, between Kal and Zod, where not the typical one-note antagonistic dynamic between them, which was really, really interesting. You've got Mon-El on Earth, you've got Nightwing and Flamebird on Earth, so delving into the more supernatural side of Krypton's proceedings. You have Supergirl reuniting with Allura and Zor-El, and you see how that plays out. So there's a lot to explore, and at the most fundamental level, right, just thematically, this idea of both Superman and Supergirl, who thought themselves to be the sole survivors, right, now are in contact and conflict with the remnants of their home world. There's just so much to explore, and it was such a sweeping, sprawling saga. It made such full use of the Metropolis supporting cast. There's just so much to dive into. I think, because I was debating, like Mon-El, for example, or Nightwing and Flamebird. I could go either way on that. Because I think like if this were a series, yes, they would get a spotlight episode or 2. Great. In the context of a film, I don't know. That might be something that you don't focus on as much. Maybe we spend more time following Superman and Supergirl. And on that note, because with all of these, I guess I have one sort of non-negotiable. And here it's that it's a Superman and a Supergirl story. It's not just his story.
It has to be.
It has to be. And so, because she has her own perspective and being reunited with her parents. And then for those who know the story, what transpires with Zor-El and then the role that Allura takes, there's a lot there to unpack. So I think just like Superman Unbound, which was that adaptation of the Brainiac storyline, they rightfully focused on Superman and Supergirl. That's the track you would need to take here. This would also be an opportunity to finally deliver on the ending of the story that the creators were denied because they were forced to truncate a months-long conclusion into one weekly miniseries because Straczynski was coming aboard the book and they wanted to wrap everything up. So this could give us the proper conclusion. And the biggest complaint that I've had, and I think the creators share this, is that we had gotten into such an interesting dynamic with Clark and Zod, and then you get to that final concluding miniseries and boom, all of a sudden Zod is just one-note evil antagonist the way he's always been. And so there's a story there about how you get back to that, right? Ultimately, we'll get there, but I think there's a way to get there that we were denied because they didn't have the real estate to do it. So there's so much. And I think if I had my way and it were a trilogy, I do think you start with the Jeff Johns storylines Last Son, which reintroduced Zod and Non and Ursa to that version of comics continuity, and the Brainiac storyline, even though I know it had been adapted in that other film. But I think you need at least elements of Last Son and Brainiac to really
carry
set
into
this
that
up.
story. Yeah.
Yeah. Because one of the things when we talked about Unbound, it was a little disappointing that they completely jettisoned Pa dying, because, that juxtaposition in Brainiac of him losing this touchstone to his humanity, Pa Kent, right as he's regaining this connection to his homeworld, as Kandor is being restored, huge. And the movie completely omitted that. So to now be able to delve into that, I think really kind of ups the emotional stakes. So a new Krypton saga duology, ideally a trilogy, make it a Superman and Supergirl story. Give us that Zod Clark deterioration of this tentative alliance. Give us that full conclusion. I think this would be beautiful.
I am in the midst of my first ever read through of the new Krypton saga.
Good man.
I love it.
Good.
Love it. And I'm glad you kind of have emotionally prepared me for that ending, because I could see myself getting there and being like, what the hell is this? What happened?
So yes. How are you reading it, by the way? Omnibus or app or issues? Or?
I'm reading it on the app.
Okay.
So and what's great is, the DC Infinite app has it in reading order in like a collection, but it also has the Brainiac story and the Last Son story as preludes to the new Krypton saga. So it was great to read those and go into that story kind of with that context. But I love the character angles it's presenting. Like you said, it's a Kara and Kal-El story. You have to have them in there. And it's just been great. And it was, again, my whole thing, and I think maybe some of the stuff you've heard on my list, my whole thing and where I've struggled with comics in general is I've always been a film person, first and foremost, primarily because I just connect with that storytelling more. It's beginning, middle, and end. Obviously, there are film series that I love and sequels that I love. But in general, a TV series that goes on past its prime, or a comic book series that, like, once you get to a certain point, you're recycling ideas, you're really bouncing off the walls and seeing what sticks if you're throwing everything in the kitchen sink against it. And at a certain point, the effectiveness of the storytelling is like lost on me. So a lot of times when I look at these comic books, the concepts like Emperor Joker, I just see Emperor Joker, I don't care. Or a new Krypton, I don't care. But then you actually hear about what the content is, and you start to read it, and you're like, this is fun. If you're in the right mindset for that stuff, like, it's so good, but it's so rich too. And it's the benefit of long form storytelling, of great television or a great comic series, is you can sit with these characters for a little while. You can allow these things to play out over multiple issues. And that's why it's like, even a trilogy of a new Krypton saga would maybe not be enough. Like, it is something where it's like, maybe we go the Star Trek route and do a few more movies, or a mini series, like a high budget mini series, because there is so much great stuff. Like, even like the Superwoman stuff with Lucy, like,
yes,
there's so much good stuff in there that I'm almost like, yes, there's superfluous stuff you could probably cut, like you're saying, but there's richness in all of it. And it all speaks so well to the primary story. And then, give that Zod Clark Kal-El relationship room to breathe. Like, let it play out and let that be a little bit more layered and a little less like abrupt. Kind of correct it retroactively.
Yeah. I mean, I guess maybe this is more for off mic, but yeah, as far as what they were building towards, the creators had in mind this months long concluding arc where it's this DCU wide battle between the heroes of the DCU and the Kandorians. And like I said, it ultimately got truncated into this 4-part weekly miniseries, War of the Superman. Right. So just brace yourself when you get there. I will say the arc right before that, The Last Stand of New Krypton, that was pretty epic. And I think they accomplished a lot there. So if anything, maybe look at that as kind of the main conclusion. And then it's like, okay, this is the one piece after it. But yeah, it's an unfortunate thing. Sterling Gates talked about it. I think all of them involved, obviously that was not the original plan, not what they wanted to do. So it's the kind of the one piece of it. It's like, it's got that little asterisk next to it, but it's still worth the ride. And I guess if I were mapping a trilogy, I think chapter 1 would be Last Son, the Brainiac storyline. And I think either you end with Kandor being enlarged, or maybe you follow it a bit past that to the point where the Kandorians form their own planet. That might be the break point. And then I think that probably is the break point. And then I think the middle chapter of this is Kal on New Krypton in the military guild, developing this unlikely alliance with Zod and working
Well,
together.
you could even, if we're going, just because I referenced Lord of the Rings, but what if the first one ended with him going off to Mordor, going off to Kandor and doing that, going off to New Krypton, and
and then you see the relationship develop.
Yeah.
And then the third part, I think you can really get into this big finish that they originally had planned. I mean, I like it for all the reasons I've stated, but also too, just in a larger, even meta sense, you look at pre-crisis comics, decades of Kandor in this bottle on a shelf. And even in current comics, a bottle on a shelf. So this storyline finally, and I know pre-crisis, late pre-crisis, they did enlarge this and all that, but here it's like you finally pay this off. It's like the Kandorians are freed, which is great, but what happens next?
Yes.
And that's what this story gives you. It's like, what would happen if you had 100,000 of these Kryptonians? So it's a great one. I really feel like there's potential here. And I don't know, the fact that we're getting Omnis now collecting this, that's like, I don't know, maybe this will get this out there in a bigger way.
I would love to see that, because I'm reading it now and I'm very much enjoying it. And
good. I'm so glad.
I think it just translates so well to, like, I could see this as an animated feature, but it would have to be like, they'd have to dedicate some actual like hours to it. Like it would need to be like 6 episodes or a trilogy of film, like something like that. And then logistically, what are they willing to commit to? I don't want it to be something where it's like, oh, here's the 70-minute version of this. I'm like, nope, it needs to be like, there's too much good stuff in here.
I know. Superman Doomsday. Oh, you're doing the death and return in 70 minutes? Okay.
All right, great. Okay, great. New Krypton, 60 minutes. Okay.
If they take a page out of, I mean, right now, what Warner Brothers is doing with Nightfall trilogy, I believe, an animated trilogy, and I think it exists in its own continuity. It doesn't tie into any other cinematic universe. So it's like, good. That we want more. We want more of that.
Yeah.
All right. That was my number 3. Your number 2.
Number 2. You know what? Did you ever read through the Adventures of Superman series from the 2013, 14, right around there? There was, each issue was made up of a few different mini stories. It was a lot like Red and Blue, where Red and Blue kind of had these like standalone stories, and Adventures of Superman did it prior to that. And I absolutely loved it. And there are plenty of stories I would choose to adapt, but the one I'm choosing is one you may have seen art from or read, but it's the Ron Mars, Evan Doc Shaner story. It's called Only Child. It's Adventures of Superman number 15 in single issue form on the DC Infinite app. They've separated each story into its own. So it's issues 43 through 45 if you're reading on the DC Infinite app. But it's basically Superman meets the Iron Giant, quote unquote. And it's a stray robot that ends up on Earth and turns out to be it's a creation of Jor-El's. So Superman is like, oh my gosh, like we're kind of brothers. And there is kind of like an alien race that essentially Jor-El built this robot to explore the cosmos, and anticipating the explosion of Krypton, this robot is kind of a scout, but this robot gets kind of hijacked by this alien race that turns it into a weapon that uses it to conquer. And he's come to Earth to scout, but Kal-El is kind of somehow triggered, like brought him back. And so this alien race comes to Earth to retrieve the robot and take over. And of course they find Superman and this robot now have paired up, take on the alien race. Wonderful story. What was so impressive about so many of the stories within this Reef series, which I wish they would bring back, is like the best ones. It's like they're only a few pages, but they managed to tell these really heartfelt, emotional stories. And I told Ron Mars, I got to meet him, I was like, it's so good. And I wish more people knew about it and had read it, because it's buried in this kind of lesser known series, this anthology series. But it's amazing. And of course, Doc Shaner, one of the best out there. Like that art style is so good. So follow that animation style, follow that creative style in the animation. And it's just like what it ends up being is a really sweet story of like Superman, like there's no Supergirl in the picture at this point. So he thinks he's the only survivor of Krypton. And for the first time, he thinks like, maybe I'm not alone out there. And, without revealing anything, the outcome of the story is kind of bittersweet, in the same way the Iron Giant movie is bittersweet. but it has shades of that. The style of the robot is very much in that vein. And it's just a really, really lovely emotional story that I could see it being expanded to feature length and being really affecting in a similar way to the Brad Bird movie. So that is probably my most obscure pick on this list. But I encourage everyone who's a Superman fan to dig up this Adventures of Superman anthology series. So many great stories that people just don't know about because it's such a strange offset of whatever is going on in comics. It just came out of nowhere and then sort of disappeared.
I got to admit, you stumped me. But while you were talking, I pulled it up quickly on the DC app. So I had come across it at some point, but I've not delved in. I've not read any of these. And so it was a digital first series.
No, it was print. And maybe it was. I mean, I was buying the print issues.
Okay.
And it was 2013, 2014. So I think the apps were in their infancy, and I don't know if DC had like an actual like really functioning library where they would have put it digital first. But digital issues, I think, were a thing happening. I just remember I was buying the print ones. But it's really weird how they kind of reformatted it and changed the issue numbers.
Right.
It became very confusing. Like when I was trying to find this story in the app, I realized they'd kind of reorganized it and separated each story. And they even separated this, like the story is short enough on its own, but it's separated across the app across 3 of the Adventures of Superman issues. So it's really great. All of these stories are standalone. So it's a bunch of different creators, all standalone stories, and it gives them the opportunity to explore some really interesting ideas that you might not see in a mainline Superman story. Well worth checking out. Lots of great writers and artists. This is one of the highlights for sure, and one that I'd highly recommend. But I think would make a really, really good, heartfelt animated feature.
No, I appreciate you turning me on to this. Yeah, I'm just reading the solicit for the first trade paperback collection. Yeah, it says collects the digital first stories from Adventures of Superman 1 through 5. So I guess it existed in multiple formats. But
yeah,
you sold me on it through your description, but also by likening it to Superman Red and Blue, which I loved. So I'm going to have to spend some time with this. So that's new to me, but that sounds awesome, man. This podcast is an affiliate of BCW Supplies. The next time you need to restock on comic book bags, boards, boxes, and more, be sure to use promo code FSP to save 10% on your order. That's FSP for Flat Squirrel Productions. It helps support the show too. Thank you. Ever wonder what would happen if a person who knew barely anything about comics decided to absorb hundreds of Superman stories from all eras and media? That's exactly what Robbo is doing on This Podcast Will Never Die, which starts with all the ways the Man of Steel stood out on the newsstands in 1938. Listen and subscribe to This Podcast Will Never Die, and you'll never look at Superman's trunks the same way again. We love digging into epic comic book runs, but what about the art of the single issue? Single Bound is a podcast series hosted by married couple Amy and Logan as they review single issues of comics, many of them starring the Man of Steel, Logan's favorite character. Listen and subscribe on Spotify and YouTube, and follow the show on Instagram at Single Bound Podcast. All right, my number 2. I got to put my money where my mouth is. Who am I always talking about? The villain with all of this untapped potential, Conduit. So my pick for an animated film is an adaptation of the 1995 storyline from the Triangle era, The Death of Clark Kent. Now, this is another instance I feel like the title will sell it. We're trading on the death of Superman, just like they were in this comic book storyline. But essentially, and it only spanned a couple of months. It wasn't a sweeping months-long thing here. But basically, you have Kenny Braverman, this former classmate of Clark's from their days in Smallville, who was always jealous at how Clark excelled in athletics and academics and harbored this grudge. And then Kenny Braverman, he discovers that Clark is Superman, and he develops these kryptonite-based powers and comes to call himself Conduit. Now, we get a lot of his backstory in a quartet of 0-month issues in 1994. So the character was introduced before. I would weave those flashbacks and his backstory into this film here. So I would combine those 0-month issues with the death of Clark Kent. But in the death of Clark Kent proper, Conduit finally makes his move. He starts sending these these warnings essentially to Clark. It's like a Superman doll with glasses, nailed to his door, things like that make it clear somebody knows my secret. So you can really play up that angle of it. But essentially he threatens Clark's life and his identity and blows up the Kent farm. But Clark is able to get Ma and Pa out in time, but then they have to go on the run. And it gets to the point where, for the safety of his loved ones, Superman gives up the Clark Kent identity. There's also a stretch where it seems like Lois might have been killed. He's not sure of her fate. And so he and the Kents are on the run, and he's trying to take down Conduit, and Jimmy Olsen gets kidnapped. I had to put this on here, and the fact that I'm always talking about Conduit, I'm like, no, you got to make this a pick, make it a high one. Because I do think there's potential with this villain. I love the look, the kryptonite powers, the motivation. Right? Like, well, you and I, when we talked about the Man of Steel reboot, it's like, okay, if you're going to make, and you don't have to do this, but if you're going to make Clark Kent a star athlete, well, what's the story reason or the character reason? What's the payoff for it? And I keep coming back to this idea of Kenny Braverman. It's like, okay, if you're going to make Clark big man on campus, well, this is a reason to do it, because now you're creating a villain in the process.
Yes. Yeah.
Someone from his past who's put 2 and 2 together, who had a grudge against Clark and Superman, and now it all comes together. And he's taking apart his life because he's making use of his knowledge of the secret identity. I just think would be a strong story and give this villain the showcase. So the death of Clark Kent, an adaptation of that 95 storyline, that's my number 2 pick.
I love that. And I think I'm still in like 93, 94. I'm in that weird period of the Triangle era where it's post Death of Superman, Reign of Superman. And they're kind of meandering stories now. Like, where are we going? Right now, he's like very gigantic because his powers are, and I'm kind of like, where is this going? So I'm excited because I've seen that Death of Clark Kent cover, and I know I'm approaching it slowly but surely. And I'm really excited to read this art because I love that idea. Again, anything that, like, if you're going to do a feature film, I think you need to do something that's a little outside the grain of what we expect from one of these stories. And that just feels like such a fun, like, I've never seen a story where Clark has to take his parents on the run and like kind of like figure this whole thing out. Like, that's really cool. I love the idea. I'm excited to read the actual comics too.
And I think, thematically, so what's valuable about this? I think it's an interesting statement on the value of the secret identity. I won't spoil the main story, but there's an epilogue issue. Stuart Immonen does the art, going back to that creator. And this is one of those issues, like, I would hand to someone if they were like, oh, why does he have to be Clark Kent? Because there's this bit after everything he's been through where Clark is kind of asking himself that, like, do I even go back to being Clark Kent? And Lois has him conduct this little experiment where she has him in disguise go into a diner, and he orders a coffee, and everyone regards him normally and he's fine. Mm-hmm. And then she has him do it as Superman. And it's like everybody reveres him, and they don't know how to approach him. And it's like he can't just engage with them normally. Yeah. And it's that lesson of like, yeah, this allows you to be part of the world in a way that you can't, because not even that everyone's trying to kill you all the time. People just have such reverence.
Yeah. Right? It's like a celebrity, like any celebrity, I'm sure would kill for that
little anonymity,
like secret identity.
Yeah, the benefit, exactly. The value of anonymity. So I think thematically, like the value, the role that the secret identity plays for the character, I think that's kind of the crux of it. And then dressed up in this battle with Conduit. Oh, okay. So that's my number 2. I would really, really love to see that. So at this point, I guess by process of elimination, it's clear what my number 1 is. And this goes back to what you had said before. So I want to toss you the ball first, and I appreciate you holding this until now. So yes, talk to me about your take, because I have a very specific iteration of this. So I want to toss it to you first. Your take on a Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow animated adaptation.
I love this story. It's not my personal favorite Superman story. I know a lot of people, this is like one of the top Superman stories, if not the top. I love that they gave Alan Moore and Kurt Swan this opportunity to kind of conclude the pre-crisis Superman story. There are things in it that I absolutely adore. There are things that I'm kind of like, I feel like there's some missed opportunities there. One of the things that I would really emphasize, I think if I were adapting this to a feature animated film, I would really emphasize that, like, camping out in the fortress stuff and really sit with those characters a little bit longer. There's some stuff where like Clark is like, I've loved Lana, but I love Lois now. And I just like, he comments on it, but then I think Lana overhears the conversation because her superpowers come back, and it just felt like Perry and his wife get a really sweet little redemption moment. And I was like, I love that, but I almost would have put that in Superman and Lana's, I would have put that on them or done something a little bit different. But there's something I really love about just like Superman's like, I'm reaching the end of my life. I know this is my final battle, and I'm scared for my friends and family. I am going to collect all of the people I love and put them in my fortress for a last stand. That to me is like, let's really home in on that and make that kind of the crux of this. The story itself is really, I mean, there's so much stuff, like just the panel of him in the fortress crying, like really, really powerful. I really like Brainiac kind of being the main villain and taking over Lex, but I really wish Lex had more of a role in this story instead of just being Brainiac's body. The little things like that I would tweak and change a little bit. And I like the framing device of like Lois is talking to this reporter and that it kind of ends with that wink at the camera. I think I would keep that. But I think it's the stuff in between. I think I would maybe emphasize a little bit more like what's at stake and put a little bit more emotion into it. Maybe leaning a little less on the Silver Age zany stuff and a little bit more into the character stuff. That's, I think, what my take would be. But it's such a great story and such a great, like, quote unquote, last Superman story. I feel like, again, very surprised this has not been adapted yet.
Yes. So this is my number one most desired Superman animated movie. It's such a seminal story, whether it's your preferred take on a final Superman tale or not, it looms large. And it's interesting, I guess, going back to what I was saying at the top of this, we have seen elements of it in the Tom Welling scene in Crisis, for example, and in the final season of Superman and Lois. Aspects of it manifest, but we've never gotten a full-on proper adaptation of it. And I feel like that's leaving something on the table here. I don't disagree with you. I think there are certain things that could be fleshed out, certain things that maybe could be pulled back. I've said for years, I don't think this needs to be as much of a bloodbath as it turns out to be. I mean, Pete Ross and Lana and Jimmy and Krypto, not everybody needs to die. But the idea of, to quote from the piece itself, all the pieces of Superman's life coming together in this way. And like you said, this assembling of everyone at the fortress for the last stand. And I think why the story hit so hard back in the day, and even now as we go back to it, is you're finally getting the payoff to all of these questions and ongoing threads that fans had been following in the books for years, like who he would choose between Lana and Lois. Yeah. And so to finally bring those things to a conclusion, bring them to a head, I think there's so much value in that. Now, here's my very, very specific pitch here.
Okay.
I want an adaptation of Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow by way of Superman, the animated series. I want it in the style and continuity and with the voice actors from Superman, the animated series.
I'm with you. I'm on board.
Because hear me out. Not that you need to be convinced, but
I'm convinced. Convince the audience now.
Because I was thinking about how, and we talked about this when we did our DCAU Supergirl talk, the 2-part series finale of Superman, the animated series, Legacy. As we talked about, not meant to be the series finale, but it ended up functioning as that. And obviously the character went on in Justice League and Justice League Unlimited. And it's not like I sit back and I think to myself, oh man, what unfinished business from the animated series. I don't. However, you look at Batman, the animated series, and you get stories like the epilogue episode of Justice League Unlimited or the Return of the Joker, Batman Beyond movie. Like you get some really, really powerful payoffs to that animated series. And you never quite got that for Superman.
Yeah.
And similarly, we love Superman, the animated series. But look, there were certain avenues that they just didn't really go down. I mean, a romance between Lois and Clark is a key one of them. And yes, Legacy ends with them kissing, but you know, it's never fully explored. And it's funny. One of the things that really made me think of this is not too long ago, we finally looked at the Superman Brainiac Attacks animated movie, which was ill-advised in numerous respects, but it did at least delve into that romantic territory. And that was what was most interesting about that film. So, not unlike those pre-crisis comics, it's like now with this kind of adaptation, you have the opportunity to finally answer some questions and delve into some territory that Superman the Animated Series wasn't built for. And I think there's a way to adapt it with this style and continuity relatively faithfully, but I think we would want to pivot in certain instances. So I won't go through the whole thing, but like opening with Dana Delaney's Lois Lane in the future telling the story, perfect. The idea throughout the story is, you have these villains who are coming back in new and deadlier ways. I would love the Superman the Animated Series Bizarro coming back on this deadly rampage. That I think works great. And the other thing too is it's like, this would be, I think, the cast of Superman the Animated Series. You would want to reflect that time has passed. Right. So that I think gives you a little bit of leeway. But would I expect a dead Pete Ross to pop out of a box sent by Prankster and Toyman when we never saw Pete Ross or Prankster? No. So that would play out differently. But Clark's identity getting exposed in the bullpen, boom, you still do that.
Yep.
I think, honestly, that talk with Perry White and the business with Lois and Lana, not like the show played up such a love triangle, but there was definitely a spark with Clark and Lana. I think you could still earn a moment like that.
And I think even like the audience knows this lore. They know these romances. So even though we haven't necessarily seen it in this version, you can get away with a lot without having to be like, remember Lana? They had a thing, just to remind you. You can just easily like hint at it and people will be like, yep, I'm on board. I gotcha.
Yeah, absolutely. I piggybacking off of what you were saying, it's like, I would want Clancy Brown's Lex to have more to do than simply get possessed by Brainiac. So you could give him more to do. But then I think ultimately built to that Brainiac Luthor combo, which is out of the DCAU, that would work perfectly. We don't have the late Gilbert Gottfried with us anymore. But I think when you get to that mixy twist, like it would be appropriate to have somebody else's voice there because that's a very different version of Mixius Pitalik. So, and then I think to finally end on this note of the two of them, of Lois and Clark, even if Clark's under a new identity here, finally together.
Right.
In a way that you never saw them in that animated series. It gives you that button on Superman the Animated Series, and it adapts this classic, iconic final Superman story. That is my number one pick.
Yeah, and it makes sense too, because I think another great pick is what was it called? For the Man Who Has Everything, another Alan Moore story that I didn't realize was adapted straight up to a Justice League episode.
A great episode, by the way.
And here's the other great Alan Moore Superman story that you can adapt in the same style. It makes sense. And I love that you brought the animated series, because one of the things I was toying with in my list was like, do I want a finale for the Superman animated series? Because having been pleasantly surprised that Justice League does address some of the loose threads, there's still a part of me that feels like, it just feels like it was, even though it wasn't canceled, it feels like it was in some way, like we didn't get a full conclusion. Why not take the great Superman conclusion story, this or like All-Star Superman, but I think I would go with this and put it in like that style with those characters, with those voice actors, pay homage to the animated series, conclude that while also adapting the series. And I think, again, and this is ironically my complaint about All-Star Superman as well, is I feel like Superman and Lois's relationship should always be some sort of centerpiece to a final Superman story. And in both this and All-Star Superman, and this does it better, but the bulk of the story doesn't really deal with their relationship. Same as All-Star Superman. There's some fun stuff where it's like he gives her his powers for 24 hours. They have this date and there's these macho guys and Samson and everyone trying to fight for her affections. But for the most part, the Lois Clark love, which to me is like the great story here, is kind of given short shrift. So there's a part of me that's like, maybe we play that up a little bit more in this story. We really give it precedent so that you really amplify, you make it kind of heartbreaking when he has to go into the golden kryptonite room, but then you get that nice little coda at the end where they're like, oh, they did end up together. That's great. I think the emotional payoff is more potent if you play up their relationship. But also just flipping it from the exile storyline, this is the real, like, Superman does not kill, and because I had to kill, I will now end my life as Superman. It's over. So you get that really, again, really interesting dynamic that really commits to the no kill bit as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking about the moment of the Superman the Animated Series character walking into that gold kryptonite chamber and the music swelling, and I'm turning back to look at Lois like,
Yeah.
Yeah, like it would be so cool to see. And yeah, I would want it to reflect the show itself. So in the pre-crisis comics where we didn't have Jonathan and Martha still alive, but they were in the show. So I would want them there at the fortress for that last stand. And to be honest, Perry White had next to nothing to do in Superman the Animated Series. So
Yeah.
Clark having that talk about Lois and Lana would probably be better served with Jonathan if we're really in this vein.
Yes.
So like I said, it doesn't need to be verbatim the comic, but essentially following those main beats, but within the context of Superman the Animated Series.
Something else you'll like. Well, I don't know how this would work, but I'm just going to pitch it, and it's like we'll figure it out. Alternate storyline, whatever. We'll figure it out. But Jimmy's here. Instead of Jimmy and Lana kind of having their little bond, we wrap up the Jimmy Kara storyline that we really wanted to see in the animated series, Supergirl's debut. Her like kind of budding romance that never went anywhere with Jimmy Olsen. Seeing that friendship / romance pay off in this finale. And again, like, because presumably this is carrying on from Justice League. So Kara's already off and
right.
doing her thing. You could still have that scene where she comes back. And again, like, you're kind of robbing one of these incredible emotional beats from the story if you have her just being a character and she's alive still and she's still a part of the cast. But there's a part of me that's like, maybe I'd be okay with that if we get a nice little moment with her and Jimmy.
Yeah. I like that a lot. And I'm also thinking like the show never did a Kryptonite Man. So I would sub him out for one of the villains that the show did use, like Parasite, for example. So
Parasite, Metallo, like.
Yeah. Oh man, I would really love that. I'll just say really quickly, as far as honorable mentions, I am shocked this didn't come up from you. It also did not come up from any of our patrons, and it didn't make it onto my list. But Superman Lives, the Tim Burton Nick Cage movie, and it kills me because every time it's come up, I'm always like, they should do an animated movie of that. Yes. And I guess at the end of the day, yes, that would be interesting. I guess I just don't feel that strongly about it.
It was an honorable mention, and it was one I seriously considered putting on the list. The truth of the matter is, I love Nicolas Cage. I love Tim Burton when he's not making superhero movies. I definitely don't want to see Tim Burton's Superman. However, as an animated, like, what if Elseworlds kind of thing, I'm like, yeah, I'm into all of that. But I am not the person. One of the big things I'm taking to task for is I'm not a Burton Batman fan. And I don't see Nicolas Cage as Superman, even though I love him and I love how much he loves this character. I mean, his kid is named Kal-El. Like, he loves Superman. So there's a part of me that's like, yeah, that would be cool. But to your point, not enough of a fan of the idea of the film or the people involved in those roles that I am like, yeah, it's gotta go on my list. So sorry, everybody. I know there are fans of this out there.
He recently did an interview where he claimed that he did not name his son Kal-El because of the Superman connection. He just liked the name. It's like, bro, who do you think you're fooling here?
Yeah, what do you like? Why even try to cover it? Like, just embrace it. Embrace it.
Another thing that I toyed with, but I did not include, was Zack Snyder's Justice League parts 2 and 3 in animated form. It's like, I don't know. If it were going to be, I would want it to be a live action movie. Otherwise, I think I'm okay leaving it where it is. I know others would be top of their list, but there was that for me. And then the other ones really quickly that I just kind of batted around. Some Grant Morrison works like 1 Million or Final Crisis. But ultimately, I didn't trust the storytellers to really be able to tackle Morrison's work, which is so specific. So I was more concerned about like, would it work? So they didn't earn a spot on there.
Well, Birthright didn't end up on either of our lists either. And I think maybe the origin
thing.
I was like, if I had to pick Birthright or For All Seasons, I'd go with For All Seasons. But for me, my 3 favorite Superman stories are Birthright, For All Seasons, and Up in the Sky. So it's hard when it's 2 of your favorite Superman stories are different kinds of takes on the origin, but that's the main reason why I didn't
Absolutely. And then let me run through before we sign off here. We did get some great submissions from patrons. So I just want to give them their shout outs here. So I may or may not sprinkle in some commentary really quickly, but I just kind of want to give them their due. So Jared cited Superman smashes the Klan. So that I think would be a really intriguing pick. Tashman,
also on my extras.
Nice. Tashman cited Matt Fraction and Steve Lieber's Who Killed Jimmy Olsen, which is an absolute favorite of mine, and I've talked about it a lot. There too, though, I'm concerned about whether or not they would truly capture the weird, wild, and absurd spirit of the comic. If they could, then I'm on board, but I'm a little concerned. Duncan had a really specific pick that I love. He cited Superman Doomsday Hunter Prey. That was the Dan Jurgens miniseries that gave us the origin of Doomsday and the Apocalypse. We're fighting Darkseid, and he's in his Hunter Prey outfit. He's got the mother box. Yes, I'm on board with that. And he also wanted it with the BBC audio, the cast from the BBC audio drama of Superman, Doomsday, and Beyond. So he had a specific.
I didn't even know that. I got to check that out. That's amazing.
Yes, but I love that pick. Jeff Tischer had a couple of picks: Miracle Monday and Superman and Son, the Tomasi Gleason run. Brian Brewster wants a PG-13 identity crisis. I mean, that's definitely a key, event type storyline that would be interesting to explore. Dog Boy wants an animated movie of the Immortal Superman saga. That's
I thought you might say crypto, like a crypto-centric one.
No. So that was a 1973 parter in Action Comics, 385 through 387. I don't think I've ever read that in full, but it's like Superman sent really forward in time and he grows old. I mean, ultimately he makes his way back, but it shows you like an old far future set story. That's my understanding. So very specific, cool pick there. 5 Million also cited Exile. So we already talked about that. Jason cited an adaptation of Birthright and The Last Days of Lex Luthor, which was cool. So kind of taking those two Mark Waid written works and weaving them together. I think that would be cool. And he wanted Tyler Hoechlin as Superman and James Marsters as Lex. What about Michael Cudlitz? If we're going Superman and Lois.
Come on now. Yeah.
I was not a big fan of that presentation of the character, but I don't know. But if we're going to keep consistent
if it's
here,
Tyler, it just feels like it should
That's what I'm saying. Chris McKenzie followed in your footsteps with For All Seasons and the Warworld saga. So there you go.
Great. Awesome.
Brian Dempsey, similar to what we talked about earlier, wanted a story set in the Golden Age. So we had another vote for that. Josh Marowitz cited the Morrison New 52 run, but just like I was saying, he's concerned about whether or not they'd really be able to do it justice. Tyler Patrick from the Krypton Report cited Kingdom Come, which is funny. We know that was one that I can't believe.
Yeah. And again, another one that I'm shocked they haven't done.
Yeah, absolutely. He also cited Super Doom from the New 52, which I don't know if you've ever read that, but that's where Superman's infected with the Doomsday virus and he becomes a Doomsday monster.
Oh my God.
Super specific pick, but right on, man.
Yeah.
Logan picked a very specific here with DC Comics Presents Annual #1 by Marv Wolfman and Rich Buckler. Real quick here, he says, Superman of Earth 1 and Superman of Earth 2 team up with Alexander Luthor of Earth 3 to fight Ultraman. But what makes this one of my favorite comics is the subplot about Superman's love life. This is the self-isolating Bronze Age Superman who won't allow himself to form attachments, particularly to Lois, only to then meet his Earth 2 counterpart who's been married to his Lois for years. He said bonus points if the two lead Supermen are voiced by Tim Daly and George Newbern. So that's a cool thing.
There's some No Way Home vibes there. I think we could.
Yeah. Yes. And then Jan says an animated movie in the universe of Superman and Lois that chronicles some of his early adventures in an animation style similar to Fleischer.
I would love that. I was thinking, because Superman and Lois, I was thinking like, wow, they concluded it so perfectly. I don't need any more. But seeing more of how Tyler's Clark and Bitsy's Lois met and hung out, and that would be great.
Yeah, I think that would be cool. And then last but not least, Rick Reason here wants the Electric Blue saga, but not the Millennium Giants. Sorry, Rick. If you want Electric, then you have to have the Millennium Giants.
You can't have one without the
other. You can't have one
right.
without the other. If we're going Electric, then we're getting Red and Blue and we're getting Millennium Giants, whether we want them or not. Anything else you want to say or any other picks you want to call out before I know this has gone very long.
Well, one more I think deserves a shout out. It's Superman #64, Dan Jurgens, and it is and Jackson Guise, I think is how you pronounce his name, Guise. It is Adam Malinger. He is one of the writers on Superman and Lois, and fantastic, huge Superman fan. Introduced me to this issue, but it's Superman every year at Christmas will go to the post office and try to answer letters that people have sent to Superman to the post office. And it's just very sweet, very moving, like just like not action packed, just very emotional. Superman can't be everywhere at once, can't fix everyone's problems, but he still wants to try, and he's still trying to figure out how to help people even when it seems impossible. Really, really sweet. Again, like that's another Christmas themed idea. There's Christmas at the Kents, which would be emotional but more fun. This is definitely the more emotional take on kind of how hard it can be to be Superman, but then how rewarding it can be as well. So just giving that issue a shout out.
Cool. I like the holiday theme here that has emerged in the picks. Listen, this was so much fun. I really enjoyed hearing your list, comparing notes, hearing our audience submissions. So who knows if or when any of these will come to fruition, but I'd be there for it.
Everything we've put into this episode, at least one of them needs to.
Yeah. I mean, if any decision maker is listening and they hear value in what we're saying, it's like, yeah, I think obviously there were some that were, Conduit is very near and dear to me, but I still stand by that pick.
I love that idea.
But I think some of these other ones, the big ones that just feel like they're begging for an adaptation.
Anthony, I would greenlight every single one of your ideas. I just want you to know, if I was in a position of power, these are all greenlit.
I feel validated and likewise. So thank you so much. What do you want to share with folks about your podcast? People will hear this in approximately early to mid-July.
Okay, great. Well, you can check me out on the Missing Frames podcast, which is where we watch all of the movies we should have seen by this point in our lives. Everything from classics like The Godfather to fan favorites like Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. You can check that out wherever you do your podcasting. And I'm at YayShondorMan on Twitter, at ShondorMan on Instagram. And if you want to follow me on Letterboxd, I'm a huge movie nerd. Follow me, ShondorMan05. It's different everywhere. There's another Shondorman out there who is my ultimate enemy, my ultimate rival. I'll find you someday.
The Shaun of Earth 2?
Yes, exactly.
Awesome. Well, I hope everyone will check that out. Thank you so much. I thank you, audience.
Thank you,
Always
Anthony.
appreciate you tuning in. Keep coming back. And remember, it's about what you do. It's about action. Support the show and receive exclusive content by becoming a member at patreon.com/Anthony Desiato. Rewards include our DCU spinoff podcast, advanced listens, sponsorship opportunities, and more. My sincere thanks to all patrons. Please rate and review the podcast via your platform of choice, subscribe so that you never miss an episode, and continue the conversation by joining us on social media. By popular demand, Digging for Kryptonite merch is available at our TeePublic store. Visit the link in the show notes to get your DFK shirts, hats, mugs, and more. Flat Squirrel Podcast is also home to Lighting the Bat Signal, a Batman fan journey, which applies the signature Digging for Kryptonite approach to the Dark Knight, as well as another exciting episode in the Adventures of Superman, now in its final year covering the classic George Reeves series. Subscribe today. Digging for Kryptonite is a Flat Squirrel production. Key art by Isaiah Simmons and theme music by Dan Pritchard.